Kia ora, morena, good morning. I am Trina Cooper. I am the General Manager for PARA. Today's pop-up chat is with Sheila Fowlie from Power to Protect. Power to Protect is an effective primary prevention education program about crying infants and the harm caused by shaking a baby. And just some housekeeping, the session is being recorded and will be made available on the PARA website. Please note your video image may be seen when we share the presentation on our website and social media, so just ensure that you've got your camera turned off if you want to remain incognito. And we ask that you remain muted, and if you wish to ask a question, please use the chat function that you see at the bottom of your screen, and these will be addressed at the end of the presentation. And we will open with karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, he aka ana te atakura, he tio, he hukuka, he hohonga, te hei, Māori ora. And I will hand over to Sheila.
Thank you so much, Trina. That was amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you very much for inviting me in PARA. This is such an amazing mahi that I like to put more awareness out there in the community. So I really do appreciate this invite. So now we should start. Okay, so just a little bit of an overview about what we're going to talk to you about today. So just a little bit of introduction and who I am, what am I doing in this role, and where do I belong in our organization. And then the first part is abusive head trauma, because and how is that related with shaken baby prevention program or shaken baby syndrome, and all about crying, because crying is the #1 trigger for abusive head trauma. And the third part of our presentation is the Power to Protect program, and that is our prevention program here in New Zealand. So this is where I belong. So, actually, I'll just do a little bit of introduction. So my name is Sheila Fowlie, and I'm the National Coordinator for Power to Protect program, and that is our shaken baby prevention program here in New Zealand. My background is nursing. I graduated in Massey in Wellington. And then after living in Wellington, we moved to Auckland. And when I moved to Auckland, I got my postgraduate diploma in advanced nursing in health sciences in University of Auckland. I've been doing nursing for more than 20 years now. So I have worked in Wellington Hospital, Hutt Valley Health, Counties Manukau, and Auckland District. On a personal note, I have 2 kids. They are 17 and 20. Yes, I am that old. and I've been married to Pakeha Kiwi for 27 years this Friday, actually. So that is me. So now, Power to Protect. So as I said, I'm the National Coordinator for Power to Protect program, and this is where actually we belong. So Pua Waitahi is a multi-agency center. It's a one service for all. And under Pua Waitahi is Te Puararuhau. And Te Puararuhau is part of Starship Child Health or Starship Hospital. And under Te Puararuhau, this child protection, family violence program, and the Power to Protect. So that is where that is the arm where we actually belong. But each, just to give you an idea how this multi-agency worked, when we have a case of abusive head trauma, we do a case conference about that, and the case conference is attended by myself, pediatrician, social worker, child protection police team, and orang tamariki. So this is why each cases we actually discuss. We discuss the overall safety of that child. And this is why it's called multi-agency. All of us gather in one place. So our office, this is our office here. So on the 3rd floor is Oranga Tamariki. On the 2nd floor is the Child Protection Police Team, in my office, and the Child Protection and Family Violence. And then on the 1st floor, actually our social worker, nurse specialist, forensic nurse specialist, and our pediatricians and psychologists. So we have 1 psychologist. If I'm not doing Power to Protect program work, I'm actually doing forensic nursing as well. So I'm part of that team. And this is Starship, so we are just across the road, but we do have clinics set up. So when we have child protection issues, they can actually come to our clinic and we gather evidences in there. So the idea is our focus is just on the victim. So that is me. So now part 1, we're going to talk about abusive head trauma. This is a very serious part. I do understand that all of us will have had some personal and professional experiences with regards to abusive head trauma or family violence. Now, this is a very, very serious matter. and I will be discussing cases, real life cases that we have had in Starship. So if you find that some of the cases or some of the things that we are discussing is quite triggering to you, I will not be offended if you have to actually log off, but I do encourage you to talk to somebody when that if you are being triggered by any of the things that we talk about, okay? So let's start. So abusive head trauma. When we have a baby that has been shaken here in New Zealand, or we term shaken baby syndrome, the definition, or not definition, but the diagnosis that we actually use in the hospital is abusive head trauma. Now, the definition of abusive head trauma, in order for us to diagnose somebody with abusive head trauma, we must have some criteria or definition. And this is the definition that has been given by Center for Disease Control and Prevention, is any injury to the intracranial contents or skull of an infant or a child younger than 5 years of age due to blunt impact or violent shaking. And so, as you can see, it's not just about violently shaking a child, because most of the shaken baby or most of the kids with abusive head trauma in the hospital would have had some sort of blunt impact to them as well. Now, where we are at now, with abusive head trauma or shaken baby syndrome here in New Zealand, it is still the number one cause of head injury in under 2 years old. We are still admitting between 20 to 30 babies a year in our hospitals here in New Zealand. The average age of admission is between 4 to 5 months, and some of them have been injured on their first month of life. Now, only 1 out of 150 is a recognized head injury. It is thought that there are 149 babies out there in the community that has been shaken but not taken to the hospital. 30% of those who presented to emergency department or children's emergency department would have been missed on their first presentation, and I tell you why later. And unfortunately, the tip of the iceberg, 1 in 5 will actually die. So, Paul, just out of interest, maybe on the chat box, or yeah, maybe on the chat box. So, Dr. Patrick Kelly and ACC have calculated the long-term economic cost per child. Now, what I want you to do is put on the chat box, how much do you think is the long-term economic cost per child? So, I'll give you like a couple of minutes or a couple of seconds. Yeah, if you just put your answer A, B, or C, go. Oh, B, Marcella, thank you. Abby, C. Any more takers? B from Laika, from Amber. So it costs $11.7 million per child. That is the calculated cost that ACC and Dr. Patrick Kelly has done. So if, just to put that into context, if a nurse is earning $88,000 a year as an average salary, that's an extra 130 nurses. Actually 138 nurses. And if a social worker is earning an average salary of $66,000 a year, that's an extra 186 social worker. So as you can imagine, the cost to the society is great. That is the burden to the society. So the cost of the society is great. So I really do think that we have a financial responsibility to help reduce the incidences of abusive head trauma in New Zealand, because the cost is great. And this is the study that's been done by Dr. Patrick Kelly and company. And what it is they collected the data of those who presented to the hospital, to Starship, or the babies who have been referred to Starship Hospital. And over the years. So this is a 20-year retrospective study. And what they have found out is, or what Dr. Patrick Kelly and company have found out is this inflicted one. We are seeing a true incidences, true increasing incidences of abusive head trauma. And as I said earlier on, we are still admitting between 20 to 30 babies. So if you can see this, we are in between 20 to 25. And that is quite alarming. And I think this is why we do have an ethical responsibility to help reduce the incidences of abusive head trauma. And this has nothing to do with the awareness, because the definition or the criteria for abusive head trauma has not changed in the last 50 years. So, so this is a true increasing incidences that we are seeing here in New Zealand. Now, symptoms. As for the definition, there will be subdural hemorrhaging or bleeding at the back of the brain. Now, 80 to 90% of those who have been shaken will have retinal hemorrhaging or bleeding at the back of the eye. Now, fractures, unfortunately, skull, ribs, and lung bone fractures are just some of the most common findings that we are seeing for babies with abusive head trauma. And remember earlier on when I said that 30% of those who present to emergency department will be missed on their first presentation, because 50% of these babies who present to emergency department will not have any external sign of injury. That means no bruising, no anything. Now, risk factors. Just on your chat box again, what do you think are the risk factors associated with abusive head trauma? I think you guys will know because you work in, in the maternal mental health space. What do you think are the risk factors associated with abusive head trauma? You just on your chat box, please. That would be good. Trina, may I ask, what do you think are the risk factors that can be associated with abusive head trauma? Oh, poverty. Karen said poverty. Abby said socioeconomics. Yep, status.
Yep, lack of sleep as well, which causes your frustration to be amplified.
Yep, yep. And Virginia said lack of whanau support, low income, stress, mental health. Yes, different parent, not father of baby. Yes. Oh my God, you guys are amazing. I think you might have already read my my presentation. So, but no one said baby. So the number one risk factors for abusive head trauma, yeah, teenage mother at time of birth, yes, different parent, yeah. Thank you so much for your, thank you so much for participating. But we are saying that baby is the number one risk factor for abusive head trauma because baby is small, baby can easily be picked up, and baby is dependent on an adult, and baby can't communicate. Their only way of communication is through crying. That's why we put baby as a number one risk factor. And also, I'm not going to go through the whole anatomy of the baby, but the basic anatomy of baby has got a bigger head to body ratio, has got weak and floppy neck. And so that acceleration and deceleration motion of shaking that baby is actually makes them susceptible to this kind of injury. And just baby's basic brain anatomy. So when the baby's brain is still developing, it's actually covered with more water compared to an older child or an adult. And so that's why the acceleration, deceleration motion, that's why they are more susceptible to this kind of injury, because it is thought that even though the person has stopped physically shaking that baby, the brain has continued shaking inside because it is covered with more water inside our skull, and this makes the baby vulnerable and one of the risk factors. Now, there's a lot of risk factors. I can still see some some people on the chat box. Thank you so much. And you can actually see here now some of your answers are actually here. I'm not going to go through each bullet point with you, but you can see there's a lot of risk factors out there, and all of your answers are actually in there. So thank you so much for that. But the most important thing about abusive head trauma is it can happen to any parts of the world. It can happen to any ethnicity. It can happen to any socioeconomic status. It can happen to any color of your skin, because shaken baby or abusive head trauma does not discriminate. Now, what I want you to do, if you can actually switch on your camera, are you able to switch on your camera? What I want you to do now, yay, thank you. Ooh, I love seeing your beautiful faces. What I'll do first is share sound, computer sound, and optimize video. So now this is our activity. Because it's not face-to-face, I would like it to be more interactive as well. And so this is part of your participation. So hypothetically, if Pada said, I will give you 1 week annual leave, and it's all expense paid, and it's outside New Zealand. So what I want you to do is imagine that place where you want to go. And so I want you to close your eyes, imagine that place where you want to go, and just for a couple of minutes. much for participating. Virginia is trying so hard to actually close her eyes. But thank you so much for participating. Now, how many minutes, if you like, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat box if you don't have any microphone. But how many minutes do you think I played the crying sound?
2.
Abby said 1 minute. Virginia said 2.
Yeah, I would say less. My daughter's only 17 months old and I used to work in NICU, so that's a very real noise to me.
Yes. Oh, sorry if it's triggering. I'm so sorry about that. Now, who here actually managed to go to where they want to go? Like in their head, did you manage to go to where you want to go? Karen said nope.
Very briefly, but I was imagining naps and taking children paraphernalia with me, and I thought, oh, that's not very relaxing.
Yeah, it took me about, I think because it's so recent that I've had a small baby, I just opened my eyes. I was like, what do we need to do for this baby? Let's get her sorted.
Exactly. So I played that sound for 58 seconds. It's not even a minute. And then, as you can imagine, we can't even concentrate. We only played it for 58 seconds, and we can't even concentrate on where all we keep thinking that baby or what, like, let's find out why that baby is crying, right? So what I want you to do is imagine a parent who does not have any outside support, has got siblings on the background, no partner is working full time, and no support, with siblings in the background, and that baby is crying from 5 to 6 hours straight. So if you can just imagine how they must be feeling. Because for us, we played it for 50 seconds and it's enough to actually take our concentration away, right? But if you can just imagine that situation, and this is why I actually play that activity. So that can cause frustration. It's enough to cause frustration to anybody. So the reason why I mentioned 4 to 5 hours, I said 5 to 6 hours straight of crying is because of this. So the Shaken Baby Prevention in Utah and in Canada, what they did was they actually did a study and they measured a baby's cry. And what they found out is this is called the curves of early infant crying. It's because they found out that baby will start crying from 2 weeks and from 2 weeks it will rapidly rise from then on. Obviously, they would have already started crying from birth, but the amount of cry will start, the increasing amount of crying will start in 2 weeks and it will rapidly rise from then on. And what they also found out was when that baby is in that inconsolable state of crying, they will actually cry from 5 to 6 hours straight. Colic medyo fragile children. Yep. Colic, not so much. So Abby just asked a question. Sheila, so colic or medically fragile children would be a big risk factor then? Colic, not so much, but it's mainly the crying. The reason why we have the prevention program is we want to actually address how they will deal with the frustration of crying. But I guess you can put that as a risk factor as well. Medically fragile, yes, definitely. I hope that answers the question, Abby. And so this is the curves of early infant crying. So what they found out is the baby will start crying from 2 weeks and it will rapidly rise from then on. And what they also found out is when that baby is in that inconsolable state of crying, they will actually cry from 5 to 6 hours straight within the 24-hour period. And people actually said, man, that's a lot. But if you actually look at 20 to, the low cry that they were talking about, 20 to 30 minutes, I actually talked to the nurses in the hospital and I said 20 to 30 minutes. That might not seem long enough, but if you can imagine going for your break for 30 minutes and you hear a baby crying for 30 minutes, I think you will actually stop eating and you will actually go to that baby, because I think 20 to 30 minutes is long enough to cause frustration to anybody. So if you can imagine a mom who's just given birth, very young baby with siblings on the background and does not have any support, and then you have a crying baby. So it's enough to cause anybody frustration. And this is another prevention program that is being done in the US and in Canada, or being practiced in US and Canada. But I thought we are not actually practicing this period, but it actually is a good way of explaining to parents why babies cry, right? So like I know everybody accepted that when babies are born they will cry, but we have to actually tell them, what, why do they cry, and sometimes what, how come they cry, for a long time. So this is called a period of purple crying, not because the baby turns purple when they cry. Okay, they shouldn't turn purple when they cry, because that means it's congenital heart problems, but they can turn bright red. Maybe in some rare cases, maybe there's some babies who might turn purple, but they shouldn't really, because that means lack of oxygenation in our system or in our circulatory system when they turn purple. But so the period of purple crying is every letter of purple stands for something. So P is for peak of crying. This is when we have to be telling our parents and say, hey, mom, dad, babies will start crying from 2 weeks and it will rapidly rise from then on. That's actually the peak. And unexpected. You would have just changed that baby's nappy. You would have just fed that baby, and then all of a sudden that baby will start crying. How many times have we heard parents saying, what now? I just changed you. I just fed you. Why are you crying now? Because they will cry unexpectedly. And resist soothing. When babies are in that inconsolable state of crying, they will resist soothing. You've heard of the term grizzly, overtired. This is when they start they resist the soothing. Whatever you do, they will just not stop crying. And when babies cry, they look like they have a pain-like face, even though they are not in pain. And long lasting. It's already been researched, and it's already been researched in other parts of the world, that when babies are in that inconsolable state of crying, they will actually cry between 5 to 6 hours straight. And evening, for some reason, babies tend to cry late afternoon, early evening. For some midwives out there, probably know the reason. But for those people who doesn't know the reason, especially for parents or new parents who doesn't have any health background, it's really also nice to explain to them why babies tend to cry in late afternoon or early evening. So just tell your parents and say, mom, dad, when a mother is pregnant, when are you most active? It's during the day. And so when we are most active, what happens when we get swayed in a hammock? We sleep, we get relaxed when we sway in a hammock, right? It's exactly the same with a baby. When that baby is inside our tummy, when we are most active during the day, we sway them inside our tummy. And so babies tend to sleep when we are most active during the day. And when we finally put our feet up in late afternoon or early evening, that's when we are not moving. That's when the baby think, oh, I'm not being swayed anymore. It's party time for me. This is when we start feeling them kicking in our tummy. That's why when they are born, they have they actually have an opposite biological clock to us. And this is why and this is why, and I thought it's just a nice way of explaining to parents on why that is, so they will be aware. Because if we give them information, they too will have the power to protect their own child, right? So it's called the period of purple crying because period means there's a beginning and an end. So I hope that these are some of the things that that will help us explain what the Shake It Baby prevention program is. I'm going to go to the video now. If you have already seen the video, I hope that you will watch it again, and I hope you'll find something that you have missed the first time you watched it. Okay, so I'm just going to play this.
Every year, innocent children are admitted to New Zealand hospitals with shaken baby syndrome. And it's just the normal sound of a baby crying which can be the life-threatening trigger.
It was that moment of picking him up and just in sheer frustration. Shut up. He couldn't get him to be quiet.
One momentary lapse in judgment and a baby's life could be changed forever.
When a baby's brain is shaken, the tissues move and tear more easily than they would in an adult.
1 in 5 will die.
They called it and decided to turn off her life support. I remember pleading, begging, please, there must be something that you can do. There has to be.
A newborn baby is tiny and helpless, totally reliant on its parents or guardians for care and love. Life's journey may see a few bumps and bruises, but not in babies, as they are at their most vulnerable.
The head is much bigger proportionately compared to the rest of the body. The neck muscles are much weaker. The structure of the brain itself is different. So a baby's head is much more susceptible to this kind of injury than an older child or an adult.
So any violent shaking can cause serious head injuries or even death, a condition known as shaken baby syndrome. As parents, a crying baby can tip us over the edge. When your baby cries, they're trying to communicate with you and the world. However, if their crying is tipping you over the edge, remember it's okay to put the baby down in a safe place, walk away and take a short break.
I think the common scenario is probably that you have a crying baby and an adult that can't cope with that crying. They're stressed, they're tired, they're angry about something. It may be the middle of the night, they don't know how to cope, and they snap and they shake that baby.
So how does shaking a baby cause so much damage? Hard shaking causes the baby's head to whip back and forth uncontrollably.
The brain moves inside the skull, that stretches the vein, that tears the veins, and it also tears the substance of the brain itself, and also can tear the layers inside the eye. And often babies will stop breathing as well, and when they stop breathing, that cuts off oxygen supply to the brain, that makes the brain swell further. 1 in 5 of these babies will die, and of those that survive, the vast majority will have some form of permanent severe brain injury.
9-year-old Ryan is one of those children who suffers from a number of injuries after being shaken as a 5.5-month-old baby. These include epilepsy, blindness and behavioural problems. He's now looked after by his grandmother Julie.
Ryan was shaken by his mother's boyfriend, who was supposed to be looking after him until it was time to take him to his caregiver.
Ryan's case is typical of the children we see with shaken baby syndrome, who has serious permanent injury that is going to require someone helping to care for him for the rest of his life. He ended up being cared for by a loving grandparent who, because of her devotion to him, will make a huge difference to his life.
To see a child, any child that's been hurt and in hospital is heartbreaking. You just can't explain how you feel. It's a huge jolt. You don't expect it to happen to you.
Bevan never expected he would become a permanent caregiver to his granddaughter Caitlin just a few months after she was born.
Caitlin was the precious little jewel of my life. Caitlin was the be-all and end-all of everything to me when she first arrived.
However, Caitlin's life hung in the balance after she was shaken by her parents as a very young baby.
I give her my heart. I just loved her to bits.
Bevan and Kay have put retirement on hold to look after their disabled granddaughter.
She has responded to every little bit of what Kay and I have given her, and she is now a 6-year-old developing into a lovely young lady.
This kind of injury is seen in all cultures and in all races and in all ethnic groups all across the world.
However, sometimes your child or baby's life is entrusted to a caregiver, a grandparent or a babysitter. Is it someone you trust? Kahurangi has 2 young boys and knows what it's like to feel stress and anguish as a busy parent. In 2003, her world fell apart when her daughter Anahera was rushed to a Wellington hospital and Kahurangi had no idea why.
In Anahera's case, she had a blow or impact to the head, and that's very common in shaken babies. Many babies are not just shaken, there's often impact as well, but in both cases they suffer serious harm.
With her daughter's life hanging by a thread, Kahurangi learned the awful truth behind Anahera's injuries and felt compelled to tell a hospital nurse.
I said to her, I've got something to tell you. And I said, my partner has just admitted to having my daughter.
Medical staff realised there was no way Anahera would recover from her injuries, so a decision was made to switch off her life support.
And I remember pleading, begging, please, please, there must be something that you can do. There has to be. And he said, I'm sorry, there's nothing that we can do. And I said, well, this can't be it. And he was like, yes, this is it.
Anahera's stepfather was charged with manslaughter and jailed.
If I knew what I knew now, back then, it would be very different. And it's easy for people to go, but there must have been some sign, you must have known, this stuff doesn't happen in isolation. Well, actually, whether there were signs or not, it actually didn't stop the fact that she's not around anymore.
Taking care of a baby is a full-time job. New parents are suddenly thrown into a life of sleep deprivation and stress. A crying baby can tip many of us over the edge. But there are a few simple ways to deal with a crying baby. Try and stay calm. Hold the baby close. You could even try massaging their back. Try feeding baby. Singing, humming or talking may help. Maybe even try some playtime. Put the baby in a stroller and go for a walk. You could try putting them in their car seat and taking a drive. But if you feel yourself losing control, put the baby in a safe place and walk away.
If your children make you mad, get out of there. Get out of there real quick. And actually find somebody that you can share your reality with.
So try a relative, a friend or even a trusted neighbour to take a break. Remember, it's okay to know when you've reached your limit.
Remove yourself, be strong enough, because that's not failing. Don't think that you have to be able to do this, you have to be able to fix this. If you've tried everything and baby's still crying, then remove yourself. Like my son wasn't thinking, it was that one, shut up. And that caused all this damage.
Sharon's grandson, Brodie, was just a month old when he was shaken by his father.
He'd been, tried giving him a feed, he'd walked him, he'd put him on his bouncer. There was a lot of stress, with a first child, young parents, it's all new.
And all it took was one violent shake to put newborn Brodie in Starship Hospital with serious injuries.
And my son was honest. He told me straight up what had happened. It wasn't intentional, but the impact of that one mistake has cost us as a family and Brodie. And my son went to jail. He did 3 years. He's had to live with the fact that even though he did not mean to hurt his baby, it has.
Well, parents and caregivers go through enormous anguish. It's not just the anguish of coping with the loss of their child or the loss of their child's future, it's the anguish of coping with the shame and the denial. It's a devastating process for families as well as for the children involved.
Shaken baby syndrome is preventable. Everyone feels stress, however, it's not okay to take it out on the baby. Just walk away, come back and comfort baby when you've calmed down. Before you feel yourself losing control, make sure you have a plan in place on who to call for help. And if anyone is looking after your baby, give them your contact details in case they're unable to cope. For more information, contact your health provider.
I'll stop sharing now and I'll just share them. I'm really sorry about the sound. Did anybody also had problems with the sound? Did you guys all hear the sound of the video? Yeah? Sorry, Abby. Might be the volume on your computer, perhaps. Right, so everybody's okay, so we can continue on. So now part 3. Part 3 is actually the most important part of our presentation today. This is the Power to Protect program. This is our Shaken Baby Prevention program here in New Zealand. So prevention is always better than cure because I think true prevention is not waiting for the bad stuff to happen before we act on it. I think true prevention is preventing that bad stuff from happening in the first place, I think. And also because the cost is actually, the cost of the society is big. We're saying $11.7 million per child. I do think that we have an ethical and financial responsibility to help reduce the incidences of abusive head trauma. Now, what is Power to Protect? This is developed in Auckland District Health Board. Also, this is a Ministry of Health initiative, and this Power to Protect program is also trialed in Auckland District Health Board in NICU actually and maternity. So this is specific to New Zealand. All 20 DHB or all 20 district hospitals are implementing the program through the delivery of education that teaches infant caregivers the dangers of shaking a baby and how to cope with a crying baby with 6 simple but powerful messages. Now, the delivery is to all whanau and caregivers under 1 year old in the hospital setting and community setting. We give them the pamphlet, we show them that video, and we explain the 6 messages and we document it. So the 6 key messages are, so the first message is normal. It's normal for babies to cry, and it's also normal for caregivers to be frustrated. Now, I think the most important part in this message is actually it's normal for caregivers to be frustrated. We just have to tell our parents, say, Mom, Dad, babies cry because that's their way of communicating with you. That is how they communicate with us. But you know what? When babies cry, it is normal for you to be frustrated. I remember we have a mental health nurse who actually said that she's got a patient, and she was seeing this mom who's just given birth, and then one time she thought, her gut feeling is telling her that something's not all right, that the mom wants to tell her something, but she doesn't want to say. And so, in the end, she actually ended up asking the mom and said, is there anything you want to tell me? And the mom said, look, I didn't want to say this to you, but I'm struggling with babies crying. And so I didn't want to say this to you because I thought it's my mental health issues that's making me getting frustrated with the crying. And so this maternal mental health nurse said, look, babies cry because that's their way of communicating with us, but it is normal for you to be, it's normal for us to be frustrated. But what we're trying to say is, if you are in that frustrated state, it's how you deal with it. So, when you are in that frustrated state, it's okay to walk away, put that baby in a safe place, and close the door to muffle the sound, have a cuppa, call somebody that who can relate to you, or call somebody, a friend, who you can talk to. But the most important thing is to not pick up that baby until you have calmed down yourself. Diffuse that frustration out of your system. So put that baby in a safe place, in a pepi pad, in a wahakora, in a bassinet, or in a cot, just so they are safe. They're not going to roll over. But for the meantime, if the noise of crying is bothering you, close the door, muffle the sound, listen to music, call somebody. And never ever shake a baby. Now, it's so easy to say, and in fact, this was actually the message when this prevention program was actually developed. This was the message that was on the brochure. Now they changed the messaging because on the pamphlet it says, "Never ever shake a baby. Are you strong enough?" And that pamphlet are actually everywhere. And then and it says Shaken Baby Prevention Program. Now, when people actually see the pamphlet, no one took it. Like, no one took it, because who would actually admit that they will hurt the baby? Who will admit that they will actually shake the baby? Because we don't intentionally hurt our baby. So when they saw the pamphlet and said, "Never ever shake a baby. Are you strong enough?" Or never ever, Shaken Baby Prevention Program, they said, well, I will never ever shake my baby. So they never took the pamphlet. And so the Ministry of Health and Dr. Patrick Kelly and Starship have reviewed it and said, okay, how can we change the message on this? How can people take this? Because if they're not taking the pamphlet, then they will not see the messages. And so they termed it as Power to Protect, because every one of us has got the power to protect a child from being harmed. And so what they did was they turned it into Power to Protect, and then underneath is Coping with a Crying Baby. And that parents can actually relate. And so it flew off the shelf. So people have started getting the pamphlet because they can relate to coping with crying, but they can't relate to shaking a baby. And also this prevention program is actually teaching them ways on how to cope with crying anyway. So one of the messages is never ever shake a baby, because there is a research that's been done in the US that says in as little as 5 seconds of violently shaking a child is enough to cause permanent brain damage or death. So tell your parents, never ever shake a baby, because it can cause permanent brain damage or death. And then we actually have one midwife who shared who shared her experience to us and said she was seeing this couple and the mom is Hapu, and the mom said, she was doing all of this preventative education, and she said, look, mom, dad, I'm going to talk to you about shaken baby prevention programs, SUDI, safe sleep, smoking, smoking cessation, and immunization. But now we'll talk about shaken baby prevention program. So she showed them the video, and then she said, I'm going to come back after 10 minutes once the video is finished, and then we'll talk about it. So she left, and then she came back after 10 minutes. And when she came back after 10 minutes, the father of the child, who was actually involved in some family violence, that's why she was actually looking after this couple. The father said, I just don't understand, because our skull is meant to protect that brain. So I just don't understand that you can actually hurt baby from shaking them. And so that's when she actually stepped in and she said, well, because mom, dad, when babies are when baby's brain, when they're still a baby, their brain is still developing. And when that brain is still developing, it still hasn't, is covered with more water. As they grow, that water grows. So, but for the meantime, when that baby's brain is still developing, they are actually susceptible to that. So even though somebody has stopped shaking that baby, that brain will continue to shake. And so that father, hopefully that father will remember that conversation, and if he's getting frustrated, he will not take it out on the baby. And never leave the baby alone with anyone you think might lose control. Now, this came about when I was talking to Dr. Patrick Kelly. It's because some of the perpetrators are actually not related, or not biologically related to the baby. But you know what? I think, if we don't know how a person is going to cope with the crying, I think we need to tell our parents and say, hey, we know that at some point or another you have to leave the house and you have to actually look for a caregiver. If you don't know how that person is going to deal with a crying baby, do not leave the baby alone with that person. And it's not just the stepfathers, or anybody who you don't know. Don't leave the baby alone with them, or you don't know how they're going to cope with the crying. And share the information with everyone, because it takes a village to look after a baby, right? There will be more caregivers out there. So share the information with everyone. When you're doing the shaken baby prevention talk, if the family is there, the better. We share the knowledge with everyone. And then tell your parents as well, because they will, odds are they will have some sort of group, with them, right? Like this baby group. Tell them to share the information. If they see somebody struggling with crying, share the information about the shaken baby prevention program. And if you ever think the baby has been injured, seek medical help at once. I think all of us know this, and all of us say this to our patients, right? But some of our cases actually, they would what they normally do is, something is not all right. Their gut feeling is telling them that something is not all right with the baby, but their first instinct is, what could this be? Let me just call somebody. Let me call my mom, to find out what this is. Let me call a friend. What could this be? Like, there are some things that they think that something is not right, but they don't know what it is, and the very first thing that they do is call somebody. Just tell them, if you ever think that the baby's injured, seek medical help at once. Go to emergency department, call your GP instead. Because I have been nursing for more than 20 years now, but I used to be a ward nurse, and when I was in counties, actually, we get deployed to Starship, to county's emergency department. And also in Starship, when I was a ward nurse in Starship, we get deployed in emergency department. And I can tell you this, we've never ever turned any baby away. When they come to the hospital, emergency department, we've never ever turned a baby away. So, so tell your parents that, if you ever think the baby's injured, if your gut feeling is telling you that something is not all right, seek medical help at once. Now, what would you say? Now, what I want to do is stop share, and I would like you to share me your video so I can actually see you. So what I normally do when I'm getting frustrated or getting stressed, what I normally do is I sing. I don't sing. I actually, I listen to the music, and I started singing to that music very loud, just to take my frustration away. And I remember one time I was in the kitchen and I was trying to figure out how I can juggle things with the kids' activities. And as you know, when you have kids, you run around their schedule, not your own schedule. And so one time I said, I was singing to this Coldplay song because Coldplay is playing on the background. And I said, it's too late to order fries. And then I didn't realize that my son was actually, listening at the background and said, Mom, it's too late. It's too late to apologize, not it's too late to order fries. And but that's enough for me to actually distress myself. So the reason why I ask how do you de-stress is no one wants to be told what to do, right? And so what I want you to do is ask your parents, ask them, how do you de-stress, mom? Like, if you are in that frustrated state, how are you going to deal with this? Like, how do you deal with the frustration? Because you know what, when they are in that frustrated state, odds are they will remember you asking them that question, and hopefully they will remember the answer that they gave you and apply that to themselves when they are in that frustrated state. It's actually how we deal with the frustration. We want them to actually recognize that they are getting frustrated and also deal with that, deal with the frustration, but put the baby in a safe place. So this is when we have to start telling them about the 6 messages, like it's normal for babies to cry, but it's normal for you to be frustrated. And when you are frustrated, please put that baby in a safe place and go and have a cuppa, go and call somebody, go for a walk, but each one of us have got different way of dealing with stress. And so this is why we want to ask our parents so they can apply that to themselves. Now, we did ask some of the parents on how did they distress, and these are some of the things that they actually shared with us, and exactly what we shared. In fact, I think I did a presentation to the Child Protection Diploma in Hamilton, face to face, and half of the class actually said they clean to distress. I actually said, come to my house and be distressed in my house and clean my house. That's quite amazing. So each one of us have got different way of dealing with stress. And so we just need to be able to actually help the parents on how to cope with a stressful situation. So the take home message, we need to give the messages in multiple doses, and we need to give it in all of our encounters. So do not just assume that it's been given in maternity or in antenatal classes or in pediatric ward. We need to give it in all of our encounters. We still need to be asking and say, hey, mom, dad, have you actually, have you had the Shaken Baby Prevention Talk? Or, do you know about the Power to Protect program? Because, we deliver this to all babies under 1 year old, to all caregivers of under 1 year old. And we need to involve the families and the caregivers when we're delivering the messages. The reason why this was actually a recommendation is because when all the prevention program in the world and here in New Zealand, it was actually designed in the hospital setting. And because it was designed in hospital setting, it's only being given to the woman who's given birth, and during the time when there are no visitors allowed in the morning. And so what we're actually trying to say is, it's about time that we actually involve the families and the caregivers with the messaging when we're delivering the messaging, because they too will be the caregivers for that baby. And men in our lives, I know it's not very PC, but this is actually the recommendation when they were reviewing the prevention program or the effectivity of a prevention program in Europe. What they found out was the messages are being given to the women who's given birth, but they're not delivering the messages to the men or to the partners. So I think we need to actually start being proactive when they have the family there. Actually, that is the perfect time to deliver the message to the whole family so they can hear. And also, when a woman has just given birth, you can actually talk and deliver anything and everything. You can give all the preventative measures, and they're probably just a bobbing cut, because they probably was not listening, because they're busy they're busy thinking about my baby, I'm going to feed this baby, all of these things. And also, when we just given birth, our body is still in shock, right, from giving birth. So this is probably the last thing that they want to hear. But if the families are there listening to this, hopefully they will remember the messages. And crying checklist, I'll show you the crying checklist, and become a champion because you know that you have the power to protect a child. Become a champion not because your charge nurse asked you to, not because your charge midwife asked you to, not because you need it for your education, not because you need it for your portfolio. Become a champion for the cause because you know that it's permanent brain damage, because you know it can cause death, and because you know that you can prevent a child from being harmed, because we all have the power to protect a child from being harmed. And also, when we are sharing the knowledge to the parents, they too will have their own child. So we all have the power to protect our own child. So become a champion for the cause because you know it costs $11.7 million per child. And so this is the crying checklist. What I normally do is, so this here on the side is actually the pamphlet. And what it is, it's got the messages inside, but it's also got this crying checklist. What I normally do when I was a ward nurse is when I'm talking to them about the prevention program in the hospital, I'll discuss the pamphlet and I said, hey, mom, dad, this is the pamphlet. There's a crying checklist here. What I want you to do is put this on the fridge or beside the phone. Make sure that they don't put it beside the baby's, the baby's bed or the baby's cot, because what we're trying to do is diffuse that frustrated state in their system, right? So if you tell them to put the pamphlet away from the baby, they will have to actually walk to that. Tell them and say, hey mom, these are the crying checklist. If the baby's crying and you don't know what to do, and you've already checked the nappy and you've already fed the baby and you don't know what could this be, read the crying checklist, because you might actually find something there that you don't already know and you might be able to apply it. But just one tip, I always tell them, put it somewhere away from the baby's bed, because that means that that parent will have to walk there, and by the time they walk there, at least they would have diffused some of that frustrated state in their system. Just the little things that can help. And resources. So the pamphlet, DVDs, and posters you can order free, and it's free to deliver as well. And there's no limit on how much you can order on healthed.gov.nz. Now the video is also available on YouTube. It's free, and it's also available on kidshealth.org.nz. And kidshealth.org.nz is actually created by the Pediatric Society of New Zealand. But I'm just putting all of these numbers here because some new parents, sometimes they have some questions to ask and they don't know who to call. These numbers are actually in the pamphlet as well. So tell them and say, hey, if there's anything, like if you're getting frustrated and you don't have any support with you, and if you're getting frustrated with the crying and it's getting on top of your head, call any of this number. Because even if they call this number and say, hey, I'm struggling with the crying, they will never ever hang up on them. They will actually talk to them and then navigate them to the right place to help them. But they will never ever hang up on them. So this is also on the pamphlet. But kidshealth.org.nz, as I said, this is actually created by the Pediatric Society of New Zealand, and it's always up to date. So there's a lot of resources there and narratives there, and there's also Power to Protect narrative there. So this is what it looks like on the implementation. Obviously, we need the management support. We have a policy. We have a train the trainer pack. I can train the trainer pack to Trina, and that has the policy, some articles about prevention program. I've created a QR code for the pamphlet. So the idea is the parent, for the parents to just scroll over, hover over their camera phone, and then the pamphlet will be on their phone, and also the video. So this is this is on the Train the Trainer pack, and I also have a 5-minute PowerPoint presentation, basically a condensed version of my presentation. So the implementation in the hospital, we want to standardize the process, meaning the documentation on how we document that the education has already been done, and that's why we have this sticker. But most of documentation in the hospital, they have a tick box now on their admission to discharge form or assessment form. So they have a tick box if the shaken baby has already been done. And what we normally do is the Ministry of Health will actually ask me for the report of all the district health boards or hospitals. And so I write that report on how are we doing with the education within the hospital. So what's next? Learn online. So learn online that you can get you will get your certificate. So all the answers from the from the e-learning is actually from what we discussed today. It's really easy. You guys will, you guys will actually ace it. And it's scenario based, so there are scenarios, role playing, so it's actually really good. So I encourage you to complete your learn online. There's no time frame on when you can actually complete it, but please complete it within the next 3 months. And then you can start implementing Power to Protect program in your service. But if you do need help, I'm just an email away or a phone call away or a text away. And as I said, resources, healthed.gov.nz, and you can actually start training yours. You can start training your staff. Now, any questions? Trina, what do you think? Shall we unshare? Any questions?
Yep, we've got 5 minutes and we'll just do some questions. Abby, I think you had something to ask.
Yeah, so my background's in NICU, delivery suite theatre and cardiac theatre, but since I've had a baby, I've noticed the lack of postnatal education, and so I've actually started an Instagram education page, and it's blowing my mind. It's taken off. So there's about 1,500 parents following it. Yeah. And about 500 or 600 people watch any Instagram story I put up. Yeah. So,
oh, wow.
I mean, and they're all parents, and, parents of under 5-year-olds, often of newborns. So if you could think of like the most important thing for me to share with such a big audience of our target audience, like what would you want me to share with them?
Well, share them the messages. Actually, for me, the most important part of those messages are about the crying, that it can cause frustration. Most of the cases that we have had, the parents crying. If I can give you an example, so one of the cases that we have had, I think in 2020 or 2021, was a dad. This is a very loved baby, a planned baby. They have plenty of support. They have everything that they need. They have, really in a best place to actually have a baby. So mom said, okay, I'm just going to go shopping. Are you okay to look after the baby? And then the mom said, look, if the baby starts crying, check the nappy. This is how you actually warm the milk. This is how you prepare the milk. This is where they try to feed the baby. This is the stroller. So mom explained everything. Now mom left and that baby didn't stop crying. And then the dad did everything that the mom actually told him. Right? Obviously, they did not have the shaken baby prevention program because, the dad actually said, the messages, they did not have the education. And so the dad said, why would this baby not stop crying? And the dad is getting more and more and more frustrated with the crying.
And upset.
And upset. And so the dad said, if I'm this baby's dad, I need to be able to make this baby stop crying. And then in that moment of frustration, he wasn't thinking straight. In fact, in court, he was asked and said, Dad, what were you thinking when you hurt your baby? That's exactly the question. And the father actually said, I wasn't thinking straight. All I keep thinking is, if I was this baby's father, I need to be able to make him stop crying, but I couldn't make him stop crying. So this is not my baby.
Yeah, so in NICU, I did exactly, I was a part of your program. We did that exact sticker, that exact education. I don't think a parent walked out of our unit without seeing the DVD.
Yeah, NICU is actually good. Like even in Starship as well, NICU have always been giving the shaken baby.
Well, and I think recently before I started there, the previous year, they'd had a loss of a baby that, they'd worked for 5 months to save, and to give a good start at life. And within 3 or 4 weeks, it had had, traumatic brain injury and had passed away, unfortunately. So, we were very big on it there. So, yeah, I guess if I've got this big audience that I can connect with, if I just say it is about learning to cope with crying, because babies are going to cry.
That's correct. It's learning how to cope with crying. It's recognizing when you're getting frustrated before you reach that, that frustrated state that you're not thinking straight anymore. Yeah. Try to find ways to diffuse that frustration in your body, even just by walking away from the room, Yeah. And if the crying is actually affecting them, muffle the sound so it's not
put doors between you and the baby. They're safer in the crib.
Yeah, walk away from the situation Like that's the best thing. And also we when we've given birth and once we have babies, people tend, or community or society actually expect us to be able to make that baby stop crying in just a snap. The minute we have, the minute we became parent, I think we were, the society or community have got this, idea that we should be superhuman and we need to be able to make baby stop in just a snap, that we shouldn't be frustrated. But we do, and crying is the number one trigger for abusive head trauma, and that is the cause of that frustration. And so the most important thing that you can actually do if you have that wide audience is to actually tell them and say, crying is the number one trigger for abusive head trauma, and the frustration from crying is what caused them to hurt the baby. But we all have a power to protect a baby by knowing how to deal with that frustration, by knowing how to actually, when to actually walk away from that crying baby. And you know what? When the baby's crying, that means the baby's alive, right? And no one has actually died of crying. No babies have died of crying.
Yeah, I think from my clinical experience and my experience as a very new mother, I think that there's so much support out there for babies when we actually need to be supporting parents.
Yes, exactly. And the other thing that I will encourage you is, before the minute we get pregnant, right? The minute a woman gets pregnant, immediately we need to find obstetrician, we need to find midwife, we need to find antenatal courses. There's a lot of support out there, and then they prepare us how to give birth, how to birth baby, how to, they prepare us from that. But after we've given birth, what support?
Nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I've started my Instagram page. It's called The Early Days New Zealand. If anyone is interested in referring their clients to it, it's Pada actually follows me. So it's all about supporting whanau to care for their children in the early days. So and I think too, I sent Amber a message, but I don't know if she saw it. Because it's on Instagram, it's really easy for young parents to connect with. It's very, very accessible. So if anyone's interested in having a look and referring it on to their clients, you're more than welcome to.
Yes. So the 6 messages, like for me, I think, the first 2 messages are actually really, really good. We don't expect them to actually remember all of the messages, but you know what? Different audiences, different stages in life will actually, will benefit from different messages. Like, say, for example, I went to Young Moms group, Young Moms run by Oranga Tamariki in counties. And so I spoke to the caregivers, or not caregivers, facilitators. And they said, oh, yes, we need to actually say that message. And that message was the quick message: never leave anybody who you think might lose control. Because apparently the teen moms that they deal with were, they are teenagers and they still like to go out and they still like to party. And what they normally do is a friend of them will call and say, hey, there's somebody having a birthday tonight, do you want to come? And then they said, oh yeah, wait, let me just see if my neighbor will look after my baby. Like things like so that message is actually really, really good for for that kind of group, right? But like maternal mental health, maybe the message that they will actually hear and remember is, look, it's normal for babies to cry, because that's how they communicate to us.
And it's about supporting maternal and parental, even paternal mental health, because a well-supported, stable parent is way less likely to accidentally shake their baby.
Exactly.
I don't think anyone ever wants to hurt a child. So it's a loss of control, isn't it?
It's a loss of control. Exactly. It's a loss of control caused by a frustration from crying. And this has been researched and studied, that the number one trigger for abusive head trauma, actually the study was from Canada, and it says that the number one trigger for abusive head trauma, for this to happen, for a person to actually hurt their child, is because of crying.
And crying, the uncontrollable crying, only comes from a baby. So you're right. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much. I've learned a lot today.
Oh, thank you so much. Any more questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. I think in Hawke's Bay we do this quite well, because we've actually got a discharge education sheet that we go through, which covers all sorts of things like breastfeeding and safe sleeping and CPR, and it also covers this really well. We've actually got the 6 points in the the shaken baby prevention documentation.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing that I have a question about is that we get our parents to sign that they have heard and understood the information, which I feel is a little over the top. Do they need to sign a piece of paper to say that they've received the education for the audit to be okay? Because we don't have a sticker in the documentation, we don't have a tick box. We literally have 6 tick boxes, and then we sign, and then we get them to sign it. Is that overkill, do you think?
Well, I guess each organization is different. We in Starship, I can tell you this, we never ever ask the parents to sign the education that we've given, but it is actually on the assessment or on the care plan. So on the care plan, it's got all the preventative education that we do. So we have shaken baby, Power to Protect, which is shaken baby prevention, SUDI, smoking cessation, immunization. So we have a tick box that we do, and then we actually put who we gave the education to, a date, and sign it. We never actually ask parents to sign it. So it depends on your organization on what is the purpose of that. Maybe they want to know that it has been given. I mean, there is a value to that. Say, for example, later on, you got audited in your organization, and they say, okay, how do I know that this education has been given? Maybe that is the purpose. I don't know, but we never ask the parents to co-sign what the education that we've given in Starship. Also in counties, I've worked in counties, so
I've never seen it before either.
Yeah,
I think it's I know that we do the same thing with our safe sleeping, and I think that came about through a court process where a parent was in court, and she said she'd never received any information about safe sleeping, but it was documented in the notes. But because she said, oh no, that's not true, they're lying, we couldn't say that the woman had or had not received the information. So that's what prompted a co-signing thing. So we give the information about safe sleeping, we give the information about power to protect, and then they sign to say that they have received and understood the information we've given them.
So they must have a reason. So
I think that's what it is. It's just, I think one of the things, it's really good because practitioners don't need to know anything off by heart to do the education, because it's all there in the education sheet. So that's great. But because it looks like such a big deal to do, people avoid doing it sometimes. Huge bit of work, if you're on a busy ward and you're short-staffed, and then this also needs to be done. And it also means that some of our mamas who go home early, who choose to go home early, the same day or early the next morning after baby's born, there isn't any time to do it, and they don't want to sit around spending 15 minutes doing education, and so that it doesn't end up getting done. But I'm just wondering how we can streamline it so it's done really well, but it's not a difficult process for the practitioner to do, that the focus is on compassionately sharing the information rather than the documentation and the signing and all that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I was wondering if it's necessary to get it co-signed by the patients, by the parents.
Okay. Well, that one, I don't think I can answer that, because that's your organization that should be answering that. On if you maybe you have to review that within your organization. But the other part is, if you wanted to make it easier, I have actually developed a QR code for the video and for.
Oh yeah, we have that too. We've got we do education very well in Hawke's Bay. We have a sheet that has 4 QR codes of our basic videos, so CPR, safe sleeping, power to protect, and there's 2 breastfeeding ones as well. And then on the back, we've got a whole lot of other ones. It's like about 10 other QR codes for different parenting education stuff. It's comprehensive, I tell you. And the education discharge sheet is 4 sides. With tick boxes and co-signing, and it's a lot of work.
Yeah,
So
it's a lot of work. So what I can share with you is when I was a ward nurse, this is how I actually deliver the shaken baby prevention. I'll go there, knowing that they're about to be discharged, and so that means I have to do all of this preventative education. And as you know, we are all short staffed. But what I normally do is, well, I don't think about we are so short staffed, even though I know that I'm on top of my head, like all of the work that I need to do. But I got to do this because I know it's so important. So what I normally do is I go to the room and I say, Mom, Dad, I'm going to talk to you about, shaken baby prevention program. But what I want you to do is, I want you to watch this, watch this video. It's 10-minute long, and then I'll pop out, and then I'll come back, and then we'll talk about the prevention program. So at least that 10 minutes has been taken away from you. That's already, you don't have to actually watch the video with them. The most important thing is they watch the video. And yes, they will say that the video is confronting, but you know what? This is the reality for our babies. That's an actual reality. So that's why we want them to actually watch the video. One of the pediatrician actually in our hospital, her daughter has just given birth, and they made her watch the video, and then the daughter actually reported to us and said, oh my god, that video is terrible because it's too confronting.
I've had similar feedback as well. I've had women say, why did you make me watch that? That made me cry. Yeah. So I always warn people, it's it's a bit sad, and so if it's too much, turn it off, but we do want you to watch it. Yeah, I think we do the education thing really well. I'm just wondering, because I noticed with the sticker that you put up that it's that would probably suffice. It doesn't need to be quite so wordy.
Yeah, as long as it's dated and signed, because like if it's dated and signed, it's actually our like you're signing your registration away, because you are the one who signed that. Yeah. But unfortunately, I can't answer that because that's your organization.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was part of the auditing process that you needed to have some
the audit process, if you want to become a champion, so part of your job as a champion is to audit, right? And the audit process is you basically look what do you call this, you get 10 random kids within the age, under the age of 1, within that particular, say for example in NICU, get 10 random kids, look at it, look at their documents if the education has been given, and then you put it somewhere where you record all of your audits, and then I ask that audit 6 months after. So every 6 months I ask that audit. That's actually all I ask of all the DHB. Like I've sent the letter to the CEO, and then I CC the champion, and then I will say, please return your audit. I give you, the template is there, and all they have to do is fill it in on how many has received the education and how many are trained and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great. Hey, thanks, Sheila. Lots of great information there. We need to finish up now. It's midday, and we'll let people get on with their day. So a huge thank you for your time, your information. I can see your evaluation there, a QR code for us to scan.
Yeah, if you can just scan on the QR code, please, that would be good. And that is just evaluation, just so we can continue to improve our service. But I'm conscious of the time as well. So if you can just scan it for a few seconds, and then we can move forward. Well, thank you guys for your time. But if you do need help with anything, like say, for example, you're doing a paper on abusive head trauma or shaken baby prevention, or whatever that, anything that I actually mentioned, and you want the paper to, the articles to it, do let me know, because I probably have it and I can send it to you. Or if you need help implementing the Power to Protect into your service, do let me know. I will help you with that. And this is actually my details. But thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you so much to Trina for inviting me to PADA in this pop-up chats. It's really amazing. And you guys are really, really amazing. I really enjoyed the question and answer as well. And thank you very much for participating on our interactive sessions. So thank you so much. I really do appreciate and value the work that you do. All of us are doing an important mahi in this space. So thank you so much for your time. yeah, so if there's anything else, is there anything else? Any last word? If you do have any questions, do send them to me. Before I forget, we do have some webinar series that I have created in the Power to Protect. So if you send me an email, I will send you the link to the webinar series. So the next webinar series is actually this Wednesday, and it's trauma-informed care. And then in September, we have Tikanga Informed, how Tikanga Informed is trauma-informed. And then in November, so it's a monthly, webinar series and to do with Power to Protect. So if you send me an email on this email here, and I'll send you the link, or I'll send Trina the link. Actually, I'll send Trina the link, and then Trina can actually, distribute it into your social media and stuff.
So I can get that sent out. Thanks, Sheila.
Yeah. So if there's no more question, shall we close with a karakia, Trina?
Yeah, thank you.
Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia ki te uru tapanui, ke watea ke mama tinga kau, te tinana te wairua I te ara tangata, Kowea ra I rongo, whakairia a ke kirunga, kia tina, huie, taikie. Well, have a great afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for your time. Thanks, Trina.
Kia ora. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks, everyone, for being online today as well.